In this video, I show you my deluxified version of Battlefront Valkyrie. But before we get into today's video, just want to share with you what the GGGGs are for this month. Each month, Bob the Beholder picks some of my Patreon supporters to receive gratitude gifts. And for this month of March of 2025, we have 2 pledges for the RM Printable Terrain Kickstarter that's going to be happening on March 26th. And $100 going towards a crowdfunding campaign, which my Patreon supporters are currently voting upon. Go ahead and use the link below to go to my Patreon page where you can get in on this month's gratitude gifts. So there's been a number of YouTube creators who have talked about Battlefront Valkyrie from Fat Dragon Games, and they created a whole spaceship battle system that utilizes 3D prints that you can make on an FDM printer. So Tom Tullis from Fat Dragon Games has really led the way in the community of teaching people how to make really high quality FDM prints. And that's in the past included miniatures. So check out his channel if you want tips and tricks on how to set up your FDM machine in order to have really highly detailed miniatures. Also, if you haven't seen this recent video from Uncle Adam, he actually did a comparison video of high quality FDM prints versus resin. So make sure to go ahead and check that out. All that to say, I think Tom was awesome though by creating a game that you can fully print out yourself on an FDM machine and have all of the components available to play this relatively in-depth game system that I am really looking forward to playing. But as a person who also owns resin printers, I wondered if there was a way that I could utilize some of the advantages of resin printers and the details that you can get from that in order to deluxify the set, especially with the spaceships. Because even though these spaceships are pretty cool and definitely have that Star Trek kind of vibe, I was more interested in having ships look closer to the GW Battlefleet Gothic game because I sort of like their ships even more, and here I found some proxies for the Battlefleet Gothic miniatures. But I went ahead and settled on a couple of these different options, opted to go with the clear flight stand on the bases, and utilized a couple of other highly detailed STL files that were intended to be printed on a resin printer where you can get some details that you can't quite get on an FDM printer. So this video is broken up into a couple of sections where I walk you through the process on the computer of how I found the files that I settled on, as well as various other options if you do own a resin printer. And then I'll talk you through sort of my decision making of how I came up with some of these alternative components. Now, there's a lot of the components that I actually did use from Fat Dragon Games. For example, these markers and tokens are the original files, as well as these counters, which I think are awesome. And those I did print on my FDM printer, but almost everything else that you see here is from my resin printer. And then finally, I conclude with a painting tutorial if you want to see how I painted up all of these ships. So make sure to check that out if you are interested, and use the timestamps below if you want to skip ahead to any of the other sections. But let's go ahead and go over to the computer and I can walk you through my thought process. All right, so when I was searching for different STL files, I just went to My Mini Factory and just Googled in Battlefleet Gothic, and really the only results that I received was from this artist Lee McCall. My guess is probably because other artists were struck down. I'm not 100% sure, but he has a ton of ships, modern ships, but also Halo. So if you want to grab some Halo ships, you can do that as well. But there's a lot of options here. So these are true sort of Battlefleet Gothic. But I also wanted to see if there were other factions other than the Empire. So I also remembered that I have most of the files from One Page Rules and that they have a game called Warfleets. Since I already had these files, I went ahead and printed out this faction here. The only downside with the One Page Rules ships are that you're only getting 3 of them. And this is where I just took one of these and expanded it and made it bigger so that you can have a 4th one. but this is an option if you want these different factions. And then I continued my search and was able to find this artist called ZBS Miniatures. And he has 3 sets of factions, and out of all of them, this is the one I chose because I just like the design of the ship a lot. And it comes with all of these, and this is where I used these 2 for the drones. I have these STL files, but I didn't print these out. I could print out this spaceship for one of the expansions that Tom came out with, but this gives you a lot more options. So you're getting 6 different classes of ships, and I just like the look of these more. The only downside is it is $40. You can get maybe 40 or 50% off of this if you become a Tribes or Patreon supporter. I don't quite remember, but I really wanted these to be able to use for the drones. That's why I ended up going this route. And then after I had printed up all of the miniatures, one of my Patreon supporters told me about Soulforge Studio Miniatures. And these are probably the most affordable sort of Battlefleet Gothic miniatures that you can get, because I went ahead and for about $9, I purchased one of these sets. I purchased this one, but you get a bunch of different files for here. So I printed this one out, the different front, but look at all these different. And here are some orc machines, war machines. So you're getting different factions. So I really liked. For this price, you get a good number. It's just that with this one, you're getting a full set, right? 6 different classes of ships. So that's why I ended up going this route. But those are all of the different options that you can find. There's a ton more. And then one of my Patreon supporters, his name is Pulsifier. He actually has an Etsy store where he is selling all kinds of different spaceship models, and if you're a Patreon supporter, he will give you some tips into where you can find different kinds of spaceships. So he's our subject matter expert and knows everything that has to do with spaceships. All right, so check out this ship from Fat Dragon Games, and this is what it looks like when you print it on a resin printer. So I just put supports underneath, angled it up, and was able to just print this out. So obviously no layer lines or anything like that, but you can get amazing results if you use Tom's settings for his FDM printer. So these are all optimized to be printed out on an FDM printer. So I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. I did go ahead and print out a couple other things directly from Tom's file. So these larger meteorites I did print on an FDM printer at 0.16, I think. I think I printed at 0.16. Can't quite remember. And then also these ones. Only difference is I painted the pointer red because I thought it was a little bit hard to see because these drift during the game. And then I also have these. These are ones that I made for X-Wing. And I made this out of foam insulation that you spray. And pretty happy with how these turned out, but I can use this for this game as well. And then I printed out all of these markers, drift tokens, the turn markers, and the rulers. And all of these I printed doing multi-layer colored printing. I do have a Bamboo A1 with the AMS, so I'm able to do it simply. But even if you don't have the AMS, you can set in your slicer to stop at a certain layer, and then you can swap out the filament and then it'll print the rest of the way. So all of these you can definitely do that. That's what I did with here with the color swap to black. So with these, any of the tokens, you're able to do this. And this is just the colors that I decided to print. And then the mines, I did actually go ahead and print these out and just painted them up. Obviously all the bases, I did print out the base. And then I modified the opening here so that it will take this clear plastic, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But these are the hull and engine hit point tracker. I wish you can barely see the white that's in there. I wish I would have made it bigger. That way you can actually see the white. Or maybe I should have printed everything in white and then had the insets be black and red, that would have been easier to see, but oh well, it still works. So these are the replacements for the Kurgan. So I chose to go ahead and keep them green, but look at the difference between these versus this. And of course, because these are optimized for resin printing, it's just going to be a lot cleaner looking this way, and you can just do a lot more with it. So I think overall it just turned out looking super cool. And then here are the ones from One Page Rules, and I think these turned out looking pretty good. And I like the blue and orange color scheme. It was relatively quick to paint these up. And then we have the medium ships. And then with this, I actually took one of the small, this comes in a base with 3 of them, and I basically just blew it up, increased the size, and put a hole at the bottom so that it can stick into this flight stand. And that way I can have 4 different ships for this faction. But here's really where I think this is super cool. So normally when you drop drones and send them off to crash into the enemy ships, it's just a marker that you can print out like this. And then you're supposed to stick in a piece of paper that you print off a bunch of these different colors so you know how the strength of the drones and all that kinds of stuff, right? But I love these way more, and I know it's way bigger than this thing, but I think it's worth the increase in size just because what I do is I will stick in a 12mm die in there. And so I'll stick this in here and send it off towards the enemy, and then I'll put a corresponding die on the targeted ship, and this will be moving towards it, right, to do damage to it. And then all of these are color coded according to what's in the rule book, because there is orange, yellow, and red to distinguish between the different strengths of the drones that you're sending off. And so I have orange, red, and yellow here. So I think this is super cool. Same thing for here. Look how awesome it is that you can stick these in here. And I just think these look way, way cooler to be sending these off to barrel into one of the enemy ships. So just really love it. Other fun modification that I made was I created actual missiles. Again, in the game, normal game, it just comes out as a token, and you're supposed to place it on any side of the enemy ship. But I just think these look so much cooler. I mean, look how awesome that missile is. I found this file, I think, for free on Thingiverse, so there'll be links down in the description below to grab any of the STLs that you see here. Next up in the video is just showcasing how I assembled everything. Alright, first thing I got to do with these is insert a magnet down here at the bottom. And for the 3mm hole and the 4mm hole, I am inserting a 4x2mm disc magnet. And then the 5mm hole, I'm putting a 5x2. And the way I do it is I grab one of these nail sets, and I grab one of the disc magnets and just very carefully place it in the hole where it's needed. And then hammer it in gently. And then this enables it to be able to transport around on your magnetic sheets. Actually, the first thing I should have done is get all of these little fuzzies. Do you see the fuzzies and stringing that happens? What I do is I just take one of these lighters and I just quickly run it over the print, and it burns off any of those little strings. I know it's really hard to see here. And then as per Tom's video instructions, I did go ahead and purchase this circle cutter. Printed this out. I printed mine out on regular paper. I guess you could have done it on cardstock, but I didn't really see a difference between doing regular paper and cardstock. And then instead of using the circle cutter, because it didn't really work, it doesn't get small enough of a diameter, I just used my knife to cut out the center circle. And then instead of using glue, I just used this double-sided tape. There you go. Alright, next we're going to cut up some of these acrylic rods. And I bought a multi-pack of different sizes from Amazon. I'll provide a affiliate link below if you're interested, because I didn't quite know what size to get. But once I received these, I measured them out, and I have the smallest at 3mm, which we're going to use most of these. I do have one ship that's going to be using 4mm. And then finally, the larger ships are going to be using the 5mm rods. So I don't know if this is the best way to cut acrylic rods, but I have this hobby saw that I've used to cut plastic before. And basically, it's not too difficult. Just score it where you want. And then I sort of rotate it just a little bit, because all you need to do is break the seal of the acrylic, and then you just can snap it right at that spot. So you don't have to saw all the way through. You just need to cut around the rod. You don't even have to cut all the way around. Just scoring it, I think, works. The bigger pieces, a 5mm one, you do have to saw a little bit more than that, but you can still snap it for the most part. Alright, now that we have cut these, just going to use a little bit of super glue and stick it in there. Remember, don't push too hard, because we've got the magnet at the very bottom. And then here's a smaller one. Now, you have to be careful. Don't use too much super glue, because it will cloud up the bottom of the rod, because super glue has these fumes that cloud up clear surfaces. You can buy super glue that doesn't do that, but because I just buy the cheapest one I can find at Walmart, a 4-pack of this, it'll probably cloud up a little bit at the bottom. But now the bases are all done. Now, the reason why I needed these different size rods is because of the models that I have. So here is the biggest one that I purchased, and it has a 5mm hole along with this one as well. So these two obviously are going to go in this. And I was a little bit worried, because the actual base that comes with these models is significantly larger. So check that out. This is the base that you're supposed to use with this model, the biggest battleship. And I was worried that this would be too small to actually use. So I'm happy to report that it can still hold this big of a ship. At the end of the day, actually, you don't need to have this template on there, because a lot of these have these 4 pointy things on the stands just to show you a line of sight for shooting. Overkill to have this labeled on here, but I think it looks cool. Just design-wise, I think it looks cool. And if you really wanted to, you could actually do 2-color printing and have label this flat area so that it actually prints onto here. So this one is actually using the 4mm base, and that's why I had to get the 4mm. So obviously, You don't have to, the only reason why I got these different sizes was so that it would fit these specific files. If you don't have these files, you don't have to worry about it. Although I will say, the ones that come from one page rules, this is a 3mm hole, which is going to work with this 3mm one. So once I'm done painting, I can just glue it on here and it will hold it. But this ship, the largest ship that they have, this 3mm hole isn't really strong enough. And see how it is actually tilting down. So what I did was I printed off this adapter, and what I'm going to do is just glue it on there now. So just use some super glue and then glue this on here. And what that's doing is it's creating a holder for the 5mm rod. So we'll wait for this to dry and then I'll show you how it looks. Alright, so now that this is dry, I just grab the one with the 5mm rod and it goes right on here. Obviously I'm going to glue it down once I paint these. But here is the Armada. Okay, now that it's primed, time to go ahead and glue them on, because I'm going to use this as a stand to hold it while I'm painting. So there you have it. Hopefully this video was helpful for you. Yes, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe, as I am planning on coming out with a tutorial battle report so that you can see how this game plays and the different options using this awesome set. Stick around for the painting tutorial. Otherwise, happy printing, happy gaming. We'll see you next time. Alright, I'm grabbing a lighter blue and I'm using this makeup brush. Cheap, bought it at a dollar store. And just want to keep it relatively dry. So I only want to catch the edges. And see how these ships from one page rules has these etched lines in there? I'm trying to catch those as well, but it's a little bit more difficult. Might need to edge highlight. And notice I'm holding it by the ship and not by the base here, because I don't want to snap it off. Get a little bit of the underside, but I think that looks pretty good.
The creative licensing isn't what people were hoping for. That Amazon basically is trying to sell their idea more than Henry Cavill's idea.
Good. It kind of explains some of the questions.
Like, if I met him, I guess 3-4 years ago, right after Fury Road had come out. If I had met him after Furiosa, I'd have said some like fucked up things to him, because his role in that movie seems...
So these are the printed meteors from the set. I went ahead and spray primed them with the dark brown from Krylon. I did go ahead and put a little bit of this burnt umber from Apple Barrel on top of it, but honestly, I don't know if it makes that much of a difference, if you need to do that. And then I'm going directly to Fawn, which is a pretty light beige color. And very carefully dry brushing. You don't need a lot, so make sure your brush isn't too overloaded. And then just hit the highlights with this. And one of the things about dry brushing 3D prints is that you will pick up on the layer lines when you're dry brushing. And I printed this at 0.2 millimeter height, or I think I did. Maybe, actually, no, I think I did this at 0.16. Yes, I normally print all my terrain in 0.2 millimeter height, but wanted to go with a higher resolution with this so that the layer lines are a little bit more hidden. But this just makes the edges just pop a little bit more so that you can actually see what it looks like. So here's the other one. And then here are the little guys. I think they turned out pretty well. So go ahead and grab some silver. I like using this Vallejo actually for airbrush. It's duraluminum. And you can use any silver, but the reason why I like this silver for applications like this is because it's really watered down or has a lot of flow to it. And when you have a lot of little tidbits like this that you want it to flow into, it makes painting easier because the paint isn't that thick, so it gets down into the crevices like that pretty easily. But like I said, if you don't have that, use any kind of silver that you already have. Grabbing some orange. Apologize, I forgot to film the first coat, but orange is one of those colors along with yellow and some reds that require more than one coat because coverage is not that good, especially when it's over a dark background like this blue. But no problem, just do 2 coats. Here I'm putting some black on the bases of these ships. Alright, I'm grabbing some dark neutral gray, which is the darkest gray that I have. You can actually use black if you want to, but I'm sort of following the color scheme that's found on this sheet of paper here. This is the, printed out the color scheme from the actual artist who created this. Although these are digital, these aren't real painted minis. But using that as a guide, and I sort of like the gray color that was in there, and just painting up all the guns and various other just random tidbits just to provide variety.